Oh, you guys are too nice. How is everybody today? Okay, I'm the son and the grandson of a preacher man, so I'll get really self-conscious if you don't speak back to me. So, how are you guys today? Nice. Okay, that's more like it. Happy Juneteenth. And we can clap for that, yeah. Happy Father's Day. I'm a full-time community organizer with Faith in Florida. We're a multicultural, multi-faith solidarity network, and we have a statewide agenda for helping families impacted by systemic racism and poverty. And being a community organizer means that June is typically not a very restful and celebratory month. We got Juneteenth going on, it's Black Music Month, we got Pride, so I'm week to week, weekend to weekend, I'm working on some kind of event or some kind of party. But I like June because it gives us an opportunity to really reflect on intersectionality, right? And how all of these issues are deeply connected with each other. And we think of some of our great icons like Marsha P. Johnson, who I hold space for and honor this month, who is a Black trans organizer, actor, person revered and respected in the theater. And I'm sure June for her is all those things, right? It's Black Music Month for her, it's Pride for her, and it's Juneteenth for her. So I give honor to everyone that went before us, and I just want to open up with a brief blessing. Creator and friend, Spirit and Force, thank you for this opportunity and for fellowship, for this amazing church with this cool architecture and these beautiful faces with me. All right, so I'm Dylan. I grew up in Freeport, Bahamas, small, modest country. There's 350,000 people in the whole country, so it's like a block of New York, basically. And I moved over here in 2016. I started college, and at college I was pretty involved with our version of a Black student union and organizing some events on campus. Back then I would have called myself an activist, not a community organizer. So I had no clue what organizing was or how you even won anything. I just knew how to make noise, right? And then in grad school I did a master's degree in public policy and Christian ministries. And that led me to working for Faith in Florida, where I live now in St. Petersburg with my beautiful wife, and this lucky, lucky job I have. So a big part of my story, is, I'm grateful for opportunities like this where I get invited out to speak to you guys about Black history. That's one of our, statewide goals right now, is restoring the teaching of Black history, both in public ed and in third spaces, like churches and schools, and stuff like that. So I think it's really, really, important to share this little anecdote. This isn't my first Black history teach-in, but it's the first time where I'm talking about Juneteenth. I think it's really important that I give honor to Black Americans. As a Bahamian myself, this holiday, although Black struggle is global and deeply connected, this holiday I feel like is best honored by Black Americans and people that have been brought up in the Black American tradition. So I had to do some digging. I had to do some research. I was like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to speak for people. And I always try and look at, some articles from the People, and then I look at what's officially published. And I'm typing up, and I'm like, Juneteenth recognized Joe Biden 2019 or whatever. And the page is missing. If you go to the White House website, you'll notice a lot of mysteriously missing pages, right? Anybody know anything about this? We got some unshelving going on. We got some book bans going on. Naval Academy just cut their entire inventory of civil rights in half. So this is me at about 11 p.m. at night getting my sermon ready a few days ago. I'm like, there's nothing here. Interesting. And that's when the gist of my message today, it's not a long one, I won't hold you guys all day. That's when the gist of my message came together, is that this is an ongoing struggle. This is an ongoing liberation, because even now, in 2025, generations and generations after the collective struggle that abolished slavery, we're still experiencing these attacks, resources and liberties being pulled out from under us, and information being hidden and buried by the current administration. So I think it's really important when we think of the struggle of black folks in the United States to think of it as an ongoing story, right? This is a never-ending sort of struggle and practice and discipline, and we're moving toward love, and we're moving toward liberation, and it's a marathon and not a sprint. So it's an ongoing liberation. Say, ongoing. That's what I'm talking about. That means we have work to do right now, even today. So let's start with a very, very brief history lesson. So who knows when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed originally? Anybody? 1863. There we go. What's your name, gentlemen? What's your name? Mark. Give it up for Mark. Nice. All right. And who knows when it was actually fully abolished? It was when slavery was fully abolished. It's pretty close to 63. 65 was Juneteenth. So Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, Union General Granger and the U.S. colored troops marched into Galveston, Texas, and freed the last of the slaves that had heard the news of the Emancipation Proclamation, and that is when slavery was abolished in the South. So Juneteenth is a day that the people of Texas, and eventually the entire country, it spread across the South and eventually the whole country, celebrated the full emancipation. They called it Freedom Day or Emancipation Day, and it eventually evolved to Juneteenth, because that's when the message really reached everybody, right? So we have a continuation of the abolition of slavery. So we see this gap between 63 and 65. Then we see another gap between 65 and 1921. Then we see another gap between 1921, when we're talking about amendments, and the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. And we see another gap between the 60s and now. And I think it's really important to name in the room that if you are incarcerated, the abolition of slavery does not apply to you. I want us to digest that and what that means. If you are an incarcerated person in the United States, 1863, 1865, 1921, the 1960s, 2025, Obama, Biden, none of it, it means nothing. Slavery has not been abolished within our criminal legal system and within prisons. So this is a story that is still unfolding, yeah? This is a story that goes on beyond the original abolition of slavery. Why was slavery abolished? Who can help me there? Because it wasn't right. That's a good answer. It wasn't right, right? Anyone else? We're getting nice and warm. There it is. There it is. So slavery was not quite a moral issue for the United States, but actually an economic and political one. And the abolition of slavery was as much a chess play as it was a moral victory for black folks. And I think it's important to name that because the reason why slavery was abolished, the economic goals, are directly connected to why slavery was initiated in the first place. Why did the transatlantic slave trade happen? Money, right? They're like, oh, we got all this stuff going on in Europe, like so many cool things. If only we had a way to expand it for free. Yeah. And as a species, this is something we struggle with. We have a deep, long, millennia-long history with enslavement. This is something that is not intrinsic, but perhaps deeply linked to, our time on this planet. And it's something that we're still learning to outgrow. And the appetite for slavery, of course, manifested again in Europe in the early 15th and 16th century. And they came over here and picked up a couple folks on the way, brought them here. So it's important for us to think of, slavery and abolition in economic terms while we think about them in moral terms. Oh. He gets the message. He gets the message. And I think we can agree, right, that the evils that went into slavery, come from a moral deficit, and they affect the people that are enslaved, and they affect the enslaver. It is definitely a moral poison. But I also want to emphasize how important the economics of this thing is, because the economics is why we're faced with what we're dealing with today. There is a quote by Abe Lincoln, and I'm going to read it verbatim just to make sure I don't misquote him. And he says, "At the end of the Civil War, I claim not to have controlled events, but confess plainly that events have controlled me." And then there's a very similar quote by Al Sharpton that talks about the civil rights movement. And Al Sharpton says, MLK didn't make the movement made MLK. And I think it's really, really important that we understand that there was no moral, evil racism that was just festering and sitting around that gave birth to the slave trade. That's not what happened. The slave trade came first, and racism exists as a byproduct. So it's actually our appetite for profit and domination that came first, and the way we prioritized the economy and prioritized money over human beings that came first. Similarly, with abolition and with the civil rights movement, MLK didn't burst into existence as a fully realized organizer and thought leader and theologian, right? He got on the streets. He got in the company of Bayard Rustin and Rosa Parks and a bunch of movement architects of the time, and the movement made MLK. Similarly with Abe Lincoln, right? I confess to not have controlled events, but say that events controlled me. Abe Lincoln was not an abolitionist and did not historically believe in equality of the races, but the movement changed him. Where are you going with this, Dylan? Whatever, why are you saying all these quotes? The important part that the point I'm trying to land here is that we don't think ourselves into new ways of being, but we act ourselves into new ways of thinking, right? The actions always come first. There wasn't an evil that gave us slavery or a moral purity that gave us abolition. It's abolition that is forming us in a discipline and in an outlook of love. It's our action that makes us better neighbors. It's our action that makes us sensitive to the struggles of the people to the left and right of us. It's our actions that opens our eyes to a world of possibility, not the other way around. What does this mean in layman's terms? You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need a human services public policy degree. You don't need to have years of experience in organizing. You don't need anything but to be in the movement, and the movement will make you. It's what we do that evolves us as thinkers and believers. Does that make sense? Are y'all following? Okay. Good. So when we think about, Juneteenth as an ongoing liberation, and this is a story that is always unfolding, we have an opportunity to think about our place in it, right? What are you going to do? Times get really, really scary. We live in a system that, is rather fickle, that can change at the whim of who's occupying the White House, or who's the largest oil driller at the time, or, whose foreign policy is in place at the time. That can change the reality of daily life for Americans. And we're living in one of those times right now where things seem really bleak. But I want to remind everyone that this is, again, a marathon and not a sprint. It's an ongoing story. And we are the history makers, right? We are the history makers, and we get to actively participate in liberation instead of waiting for liberation to come to us, right? Because we act ourselves into new ways of thinking, not think ourselves into new ways of acting. So you might be thinking, well, I don't know what to do. You're saying that we need to do things and not think things, but I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. All right. Welcome to Dylan's premature school of what to do, right? I think I could probably bet for the youngest in the room. So, I have a lot to learn. So take all of this with many, many grains of salt, but I'm going to leave us with 3 things that we can do today and moving forward, not only to survive these dark times, but also to be the history makers and to act ourselves into new ways of thinking. First things first, do not comply in advance. What does that mean? It means that we have a certain study in community organizing. We have a discipline of watching the behavior of fascists, how fascist movements have arisen across the globe, how they're rising now, not only in the United States, but in France and in Germany. And one of the best things we can do is not to comply in advance. Right now, we're in a stage called amuse and confuse. That's the stage that we're in, where we're constantly inundated with all these news stories and policy changes and all these things getting gutted and pulled back. And the point of that, it's designed to confuse us and disorient us and make us prioritize fear over what we know to be true. So unless it's illegal, right? Don't do it. Do not comply in advance. Do not take the bait. Do not change the name of the foundation. Do not cut the funding. Do not fire the minority. Do not do any of it in the name of protecting yourself or complying in advance, right? That is one of the first steps, right? Target, Walmart, Citibank, Raytheon, all of these companies that gutted their DEI policies and removed and pulled out of Pride this year, none of them were charged with breaking the law. None of them were forced to do that. Why'd they do it, though? To score points with an administration and protect themselves from being targeted. That's a mistake. I know we have much smaller fish to fry than multi-million-dollar budgets and weapons companies, but in the influence you do have, don't let this administration bully you into complying in advance. So that's the beginning of the end officially, when you're doing things not even because they ask you to, but because you think it's right, and you think it'll keep you safe. Cool? Second thing, this one might sting a little bit, but I have to say it. News is not free. News is not free. Pay for your news. Subscribe to a journal. Become a friend of journalists, historians, artists. Go to plays, pay for the play. Stop pirating. Buy books. They're unshelving a lot of books, right? Donate to causes. Become a friend of historians and journalists. Anywhere you see an opportunity, trade your long walk at the beach for a museum tour, but make sure you're getting informed and you're becoming an active participant in the way information is being brought to you, whether that's culturally or with local news, right? I'm on a journey myself right now where I'm trying to, clean up how I receive news, and I'd love to talk more about that in the back at the end if you'd like. But yeah, news is not free. Make sure you're getting culturally involved and culturally aware. And the last one is talk to your neighbors. This is something that will always shock Bahamian me. I grew up in a culture that was deeply connected with everyone around us. And there's a diversity of folks in the Bahamas, not as diverse as the U.S., but we have Haitian populations and Jamaican populations. It's multi-generational. We have white folks. It is a diverse area, but at the end of the day, we're all Bahamian, and I think it's really important that we cultivate strong relationships with our neighbors, not just our physical neighbors that live right across the street from us, but our coworkers, the people we worship with, the people we teach with, learn with. It's so important now more than ever to have real relationships with people. I don't know if this is a Gen Z or a millennial thing, but I have many friends, and they just don't know who they live next to. And they just have no connection with the world outside of the connection that they get through technology. That is a great, great mistake. You know, our technology is evolving and changing, and our algorithms are designing our social media use to push us into echo chambers of people that we agree with. We only hear from people that we agree with, and we only see things that we like, or we see things that we like to hate. So it's really, really important to talk to your neighbors, especially something I get a lot is, well, my neighbors are MAGA, or my neighbors are dangerous. You know, my neighbors believe all these crazy things about the world and minorities and taxes and stuff. And I'm like, and the worst thing we could do is isolate those folks, because then they'll get organized by someone that has more money than us, has more connections than us, and have more nefarious goals than we do. So isolation is one of the biggest things that we should be worried about. So talk to your neighbors, and don't give up on people. I think it's up to us, not the White House. I'm going to say that one more time. It's up to us, not the White House. So in my personal time, I'm a part of an organization called Dream Defenders, and it was started quite literally to defend MLK's dream. It was started after the shooting of Trayvon Martin, and it blossomed into a full movement in 2014 during the Ferguson uprisings. And I was invited to a national convening where I met with the political strategists there, and I was talking to them about the work that I do with Faith in Florida, and I was just like, man, I'm so pulled back and forth. I feel like I should be working on issues, but all the money is in elections, right? I feel like I should be working on campaigns and trying to get policies changed, but everyone wants to do like voter outreach and all this stuff. And he said something really important to me, and he said, when you vote, you're not voting for someone that's going to tuck you in at night. You're not voting for someone that's going to kiss it better. You're not voting for a superhero. You're voting for a person. And that person that you vote into office, the movement needs to make them, right? They need to take the posture that MLK and Abe Lincoln took, which is that I have not controlled events, but events have controlled me. That person becomes our target, and that person becomes someone that we consistently lobby and hold accountable so that our material needs are met, which means that voting someone into office will not promise liberation. Because Abe Lincoln wasn't voted into office as an abolitionist. He became one, right? So the onus is on us, really. The movement is what will liberate black folks. The movement is what will liberate poor folks. The movement is what will liberate queer people. The movement is what will liberate disabled folks. The movement is what will bring us to beloved community, not elected officials. So I invite you to take a really deep breath. What's happening in Washington is not the end of the world. It's not the end-all, be-all. Right? This is a marathon and not a sprint, and we're in an ongoing liberation. I want to close with one of the most inspiring speeches that Dr. King gave. It's called Our God is Marching On. And, you know, MLK, one of his famous quotes is that the moral arc of the universe is justice. And, you know, in his faith tradition, I love to share this fun fact. MLK originally organized UU people, right? He started the UU tradition and then eventually pivoted over to Southern Baptist groups. But, he says there's a verse in his faith tradition that goes, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." And he would often quip in interviews that, the scripture didn't say the weapons wouldn't come, just that they wouldn't prosper. The moral arc of the universe is justice. There is an arc, and we're in a very unpleasant part of that arc right now, but it ends in justice. And we have an opportunity to fully live into that story and say, during the most uncertain times, during the most frightening times, I'm proud of what side I was on. I'm proud of what I was doing when this person was president. I'm proud of what I was doing when these rollbacks were happening. I'm proud of what I was doing when these people were afraid and being targeted. And that's the invitation I have for you today, to recognize Juneteenth as this holiday that is celebrated to emphasize that it wasn't all solved at once, but that some people were free 2 years later, some people were free 100 years later, and some people are still not free today. Juneteenth is an ongoing liberation. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So find your spot in the race and run it. Thank you, guys.